The summer fair had always been the busiest weekend of the year. Colorful lights stretched across the town square, children laughed as they chased balloons, and the smell of grilled corn and fresh pastries filled the evening air. I hadn't planned on coming, but my 8-year-old nephew, Ethan, had been begging me for days. "Uncle Jake, you promised," he reminded me as we walked through the entrance, clutching a giant blue cotton candy. "I know," I laughed. "And I always keep my promises." What I didn't know was that this ordinary evening would bring me face to face with someone I had spent years trying to forget. We stopped near the carousel so Ethan could watch the horses spin. While he pointed excitedly at the lights, I looked across the crowd, and froze. Standing beside a small flower booth was Emily. She looked different from the last time I'd seen her. Her hair was a little shorter, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there years ago. But her smile, it was exactly the same. She hadn't noticed me yet. For a second, I considered turning around. Walking away would have been easier than reopening memories I had worked so hard to bury. 5 years earlier, we'd been inseparable. We had talked about buying a little house together, adopting a dog, and building a future neither of us could imagine without the other. Then life had intervened. My father became seriously ill, forcing me to leave town to care for him. Emily received a career opportunity hundreds of miles away. We promised we would make the distance work. For a while, we did. Then the phone calls became shorter. The messages became less frequent. Eventually, silence settled between us like a wall neither of us knew how to climb. When my father passed away, I wanted to call her. I even dialed her number several times. But I never pressed call. I convinced myself she had moved on. Maybe she had convinced herself I had too. "Uncle Jake," Ethan tugged gently on my sleeve. "Who's that lady?" I followed his gaze. Emily had finally looked up. Our eyes met. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she smiled. It wasn't forced. It wasn't awkward. It was warm, almost relieved. She slowly walked toward us. "Jake." "Hi, Emily. I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I." There was an uncomfortable pause before Ethan stepped forward with the confidence only children possess. "I'm Ethan," he announced proudly. "I'm his favorite nephew." Emily laughed softly. "I can believe that. And who are you?" Ethan asked. Emily looked at me before answering. "I'm an old friend." The words stung more than I expected. Old friend. Maybe that was all we were now. Still, there was kindness in her eyes, something that told me the story between us might not be finished after all. Emily and I walked side by side through the fair while Ethan skipped a few steps ahead, determined to win every carnival game he saw. The conversation between us started cautiously, like two people testing the strength of an old bridge. "So," Emily said with a small smile, "you've become an uncle." "The best job I've ever had," I replied, watching Ethan proudly carry a stuffed dinosaur he'd won. "My sister works long shifts at the hospital, so we spend a lot of time together. I can see how much he adores you." I smiled. The feeling's mutual. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sounds of laughter, music, and carnival rides filled the silence. "You look happy," Emily finally said. "I've had good days and bad days," I admitted. "Mostly, I've just been trying to move forward." She nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." We stopped at a lemonade stand, and I bought 3 cups. Ethan grabbed his drink and hurried toward a nearby magician performing tricks for children. "He'll stay where we can see him," I said. Emily watched Ethan laugh with the other kids. "He's a wonderful little boy. He reminds me every day not to take life so seriously." She smiled, but I noticed sadness hiding behind her eyes. "I wanted to call you after your father passed away," she said quietly. I looked at her in surprise. "You knew. A mutual friend told me." She lowered her eyes. "I picked up my phone so many times, but I thought maybe you'd rather not hear from me." "I thought the same thing about you." A bittersweet laugh escaped both of us. "We spent years waiting for the other person to make the first move," I said. "What a waste of time." It was. The honesty between us felt strangely comforting. There were no accusations, no anger, only two people realizing how easily silence could change the course of their lives. Just then, Ethan came running back toward us, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Uncle Jake, Uncle Jake, I won another prize." He held up a tiny plush bear with a bright red ribbon around its neck. "It's for her," he whispered loudly enough for Emily to hear. Emily laughed. "For me?" He nodded seriously. "You look like you needed something to make you smile." Her expression softened as she accepted the little bear. "Thank you," she said, kneeling to his height. "I'll treasure it." Ethan looked from Emily to me with a thoughtful expression. Then, in the innocent way only children can, he asked the question neither of us was prepared for. Uncle Jake. Yeah, he pointed at Emily. Is she the girl you love? Time seemed to stop. The music faded into the background. Emily's cheeks turned bright pink as she looked at me, then down at the little bear in her hands. A shy smile spread across her face. Barely above a whisper, she answered before I could. I hope so. The world around us seemed to fade into the background. The Ferris wheel continued turning, children laughed nearby, and music drifted through the warm evening air, but all I could hear were Emily's quiet words. I hope so. For a heartbeat, I simply stared at her. 5 years of unanswered questions, missed chances, and silent regrets suddenly felt much smaller than the woman standing in front of me. Ethan looked between us with a puzzled expression. Was that the right answer? He asked. Emily laughed through her blush. I think that's a question your uncle has to answer. I knelt beside Ethan and smiled. Buddy, could you do me a favor? What? Go see if you can win one more prize. I'll be right here. He studied my face for a moment before grinning. Okay, but don't leave. I won't. As Ethan ran toward another game booth, I turned back to Emily. I'm sorry, I said quietly. She looked surprised. For what? For believing silence meant you stopped caring. For letting fear decide my future. For convincing myself that losing you would hurt less than risking another goodbye. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I was scared too. Every day I hoped you'd call. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time something wonderful happened, or something terrible, I wondered how you were doing. I never stopped thinking about you. Neither did I. A tear slipped down her cheek before she quickly brushed it away. I reached into my pocket and handed her something I had carried for years. It was a small silver keychain shaped like a compass. She stared at it in disbelief. You still have this? I bought you the day we talked about traveling the world together. I kept yours because I always hoped I'd have the chance to give it to you. Emily held the tiny compass in her palm as though it were the most precious thing she'd ever received. I can't believe you saved it. I couldn't throw away hope. She stepped closer. So, what happens now? I smiled. This time, we stop assuming. She laughed softly. And we start talking. Every day. And no disappearing. Never again. Emily wrapped her arms around me, and I hugged her tightly, realizing how perfectly familiar it still felt. Across the midway, Ethan spotted us and threw both hands into the air. I knew it. He shouted loud enough for half the fair to hear. People nearby chuckled as he sprinted toward us. When he reached us, he looked proudly at Emily. So, can I call you Aunt Emily someday? Emily glanced at me, her eyes sparkling with hope. If your uncle is okay with that. I took her hand without hesitation. I'd like that very much. Ethan cheered like his favorite team had just won a championship. The three of us spent the rest of the evening riding the Ferris wheel, sharing funnel cake, and laughing about everything we'd missed. It didn't feel like we were trying to reclaim the past. Instead, it felt like we were finally beginning the future we had once dreamed about. Months later, on a quiet hill overlooking the same town, I asked Emily the question I should have asked years before. She smiled before I even finished. Yes. A year after that, Ethan stood proudly beside us as the ring bearer at our wedding, reminding every guest with a huge grin. I told Uncle Jake she was the girl he loved. Sometimes, life gives people a second chance, not because they deserve one, but because they finally find the courage to speak instead of staying silent. And for us, one innocent question from a little boy became the beginning of a lifetime together.